Tonight we're going to answer the question that's come into our box. What do you think about the wearing of jewelry and makeup? Is this biblical? Now I'm going to take a little longer than usual to answer this question tonight because I realize that it might be a very sensitive question to some people. And I like to really make certain that I'm not giving just my opinion on something. You know, it doesn't matter what I think about it, by the way. That question is worded in a sort of awkward way because it doesn't matter one bit what I think or what you think. And you know, it doesn't even matter what this church or this preacher or that preacher thinks about it. The only thing that I'm concerned about tonight, friends, is what does God think about an issue? That's the important thing, isn't it? And of course, that's what we want to find out here tonight. We're going to look at it purely from that standpoint. Now listen, love is the greatest thing in the world. I think all of us realize that. Jesus gave those two great commandments, you remember. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbors yourself. Love is a fulfilling of the law. Everything we do in this world, my friends, we ought to do it because we love the Lord. Everything we do in relation to our service for God, our obedience, our keeping of the commandments of God, is to be done from the motive of love, not a fire escape. I think I talked to you before about a fire escape religion. There are a lot of people that have this. They really do. They know there's a fire down at the end of the road, and they don't want to go in it. So what do? They force themselves to do all the things they believe that Christian people ought to do in order to stay out of the fire. Now that is a miserable, miserable religion, friends. When we obey God and keep His commandments and anything else we do, we should do it because we love Him with all our hearts. Now we do that all the time on a human basis, don't we? We really do. My wife prepares my favorite dish when I come in at night, not because she's afraid I'll divorce her, but because she loves me and she wants to please me. And when her birthday or anniversary is approaching, I will watch and listen carefully to see if I can detect what she'd like to have. Now, she doesn't have to hit me over the head to let me know. You know, the little women have ways of doing that. But when I find out, friends, I will gladly get it for her because I love her. See? And in the same way, I love God. In fact, I love Him more than I love my wife. And I'm always looking through this book, the Bible, to find little hints and indications from God as to how to please Him. Now, shouldn't we be doing that all the time, friends? We ought to be reading the Bible and searching the Scriptures and trying to find out how to please Him and what will make Him happy. In fact, there's a verse in the Bible. I'll quote it to you. It's out of the 20th century translation of the Bible, Ephesians 5 and verse 10. It says, always be trying to find out what best pleases the Lord. Isn't that a wonderful motto for a Christian? Always be searching the Bible to find out there how to please Him in what we do. Whether it's a little thing or a big thing, that should be our motive. And God should not have to threaten us, friends, to get us to do things. All He needs to do, if we really love Him, our eyes and mind will be quick and keen to respond to it, and we'll do it because we love Him. Look at this text in Psalm 32, verse 8. It's one of my favorite Psalms. But in the 8th verse of Psalm 32, God says, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. Be ye not as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held in with bit and bridle, lest they come near unto thee. Now God said, look, I want to guide you with my eye. I want to instruct you with my eye. I want to be able to just glance at you and correct you, and you'll respond to me because you love me. I don't want to have to jerk you around like a horse or a mule to correct you. I just want to glance at you with my eye and have you to be corrected. Now, friends, I believe that for somebody who loves, that's all that's needed. Isn't that right? And we ought to be very sensitive to God's will by studying the Bible and finding out what He says in there and what pleases Him and what displeases Him. And friends, listen, if I find that something displeases the Lord, even if He gives me a hint and a good indication, He doesn't have to say, look, you do this or else. I'll throw you in the fire if you don't do this. He doesn't have to say that to me. All He has to say is, look, I don't like that. And shouldn't that be sufficient, friends? Shouldn't that be sufficient? Now, the question tonight is, what does God think about the wearing of makeup and jewelry? Not what Joe Cruz or anybody else thinks. What does God think? Does He like it? Or does He dislike it? And I say, friends, if we can find the answer to that question in the Bible, we've got the answer to the question that came in the question box, haven't we? We ought to have it. I hope we have it if we can find that out. Now, what does the Bible say? Does God give us any hints or indications here in the Bible as to what He thinks about this practice? Well, I'm going to go right through the Bible reading a number of verses tonight. And by the way, all of these verses will be in a little book that will be handed out as you leave the meeting today. And this will contain every text that I'm going to give right now, plus a lot more as well. I think about 46 texts. So if you don't get to write these down, you'll get them all as you leave. This will be given one to a family as you go out from the meeting today. But now, the first text I'd like to read is found in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 35. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Now this Bethel is a place where Jacob was converted. Remember that? It's where he struggled with the angel and became a new man out there. And now he's taking his family back to that sacred spot and to build an altar there to worship God and to dedicate his family at that holy place. But before he went up there to take his family, they laid aside these things, the ornaments, and in fact they buried them there, it says. They got rid of the strange gods which were in their hand and the earrings which were in their ears. And then they went up to the altar of God after burying those things there and going to the altar. Now I gather, friends, that they had a good reason for this. We're going to find as we go on reading in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, that these things were marks of the heathen people, and that God did not approve of these things. All right, now this is what you're going to notice as we go along. When they went up to dedicate their lives, they laid aside those things, buried them, and then went up to the altar of God. You come on to the next chapter of the Bible in Exodus, and chapter 33. Exodus 33. Here the Israelites are headed toward the promised land. Verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, Depart and go up hence. Verse 2, And I will send an angel before thee, and I will drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. For I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. And when the people heard these evil tidings, they mourned, and no man did put on him his ornaments. For the Lord had said unto Moses, Say unto the children of Israel, You're a stiff-necked people. I will come up into the midst of thee in a moment and consume thee. Therefore now put off thy ornaments from thee, that I may know what to do unto thee. And the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by the Mount Horeb. Now, friends, before they could go into the promised land, God made them take off their ornaments. You say, well, now, what does that have to do with us? You know, that's something happened way back in the Old Testament. It has no application today to the people living under the new covenant here in the New Testament times. Well, friends, let's find out if it has anything to do with us. Please come to the New Testament now, 1 Corinthians 10, and the first few verses. And here we read something very interesting about the Israelites as they came up out of Egypt, referring back to that same time I read just now in the book of Exodus. It talks here about how they went through the Red Sea, and they came in verse 7. It says, in verse 6 rather, Now these things were our examples. Talking about the Israelites as they began their journey to the promised land. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted. Neither murmur ye, as some of them murmured. Verse 11, Now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they're written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Now listen, everything that happened to that ancient nation of Israel happened as an example for us, friends. There is a direct parallel between ancient Israel and modern Israel. We're modern Israel, you see. And their coming out of the bondage of Egypt represents our coming out of the bondage of sin. Their crossing the Red Sea represents baptism for us, because it says right here, and they were all baptized unto Moses and the cloud and the sea. So that represents baptism for us. Their going through the wilderness represents our going through this old dark world of sin. And their coming into Canaan represents our coming into the heavenly Canaan. See? Beautiful parallel. And it says it all happened for an example for us. And so when we come back here and read that before they could go into the land of Canaan, they had to lay aside their ornaments, my friends, there is a parallel. I really believe that it's an indication of what pleases the Lord. Now you come on down to 2 Kings 9 and verse 30. And we find the first recorded instance of the use of colorful cosmetics. Now this is the first either inside or outside the Bible. We don't have any record even from secular history of any earlier use of colorful cosmetics than this text right here in 2 Kings 9:30. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tarred her head and looked out at a window. That's the first record we have of a woman painting her face. And it was Jezebel doing it. You know who Jezebel was? Not a very savory character, was she? She destroyed hundreds of God's prophets and was a very, very wicked woman, of course. And I know my dear old Baptist father used to say she's painted up like Jezebel. Have you heard that expression? This is where it came from, of course, because she apparently originated the practice, as far as we know, because it's the earliest known instance of it. Well, we can come on over into the many writings of the prophets. We come, for example, to Isaiah chapter 3, and notice a very interesting record here about the daughters of Zion. Verse 16 says, Moreover the Lord saith, Because the daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. Verse 18, And that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their cauls and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs and the headbands, and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and nose jewels. Now some of these we don't even recognize. They're oriental objects of adornment. Over in India, for example, where I lived for 5 years, you see all of these things. They have the nose jewels, of course, that are mentioned here, and the bangles and everything else covering their bodies. And after describing the fact that the daughters of Zion were wearing these things, come on down a few verses now and see what God thought about it and what He said about it. In chapter 4, verses 2 to 4, In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion and he that remaineth in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even every one that's written among the living in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. God says, I'm going to wash away the filth of the daughters of Zion, after describing it, of course. And then He said the ones that are left are going to be holy and beautiful and glorious and comely, which means good looking. You know, the women put these things on to make themselves good looking. But God apparently doesn't see things the way we do, friends. And He said, I'm going to wash away the filth of these daughters of Zion. And then He says those that are left are going to be comely and beautiful and glorious and holy. So we get a pretty good idea here, again, of the way God looked upon these things. Now, notice He says here, rings. He says rings. Now, I've had people say to me, I've had a high school senior say to me, well, you know, God wasn't talking about my class ring, because that's not really an ornament. That's a symbol of my being a senior. So He wasn't talking about that. He was talking about other kinds of rings. And then I've had Masons say the same thing. You know, they have a Masonic ring, and they say, well, you know, my ring signifies the fact I belong to the lodge. And so God wasn't talking about this ring. He was talking about other rings. And then, of course, there's the birthstone ring and the friendship ring and the engagement ring and the wedding ring, and you could go right on down the list. And it would be easy, I think, for any of us to say, well, you know, God wasn't talking about the one I got on. He was talking about everybody else's. Now, friends, what are we trying to find out here as we read these verses? We're trying to find out how to please the Lord. Is that right? Not how to get around pleasing Him. See, we're trying to find out how to please Him. Now, I can quibble over the kind of ornaments I'm wearing, the kind of rings, and I can say, well, God didn't mean this. But friends, I don't want to run any risk of displeasing God. Do you? I'm trying to find out how to please Him. I'm not trying to find out how much I can get by with and still make it to heaven. Now, God is not saying here, you take that off or else. No, He's not. All He's doing is giving us some hints and some indications of what He likes and what pleases Him. And what I'm saying is, friends, if we love Jesus with all our heart, we'll want to do the thing that pleases Him, and we'll not want to run any risk of displeasing Him. That's what I believe. Now, sometimes people say, well, Brother Joe, what about the wedding ring? You know, that one really is a sort of a sacred thing. Well, do you find anything in the Bible, my friends, about any sign or symbol of being married? Do you find anything in the Bible about that? Do you know what a marriage is made up of? Promises that two people make to each other. Isn't that right? Promises. Do you know where that wedding ring came from? Let me read you something interesting. I've got here in my hand a page out of the book by Cardinal John Newman, one of the princes of the cardinals of the Catholic Church. He wrote a book entitled An Essay on the Development of Christian Doctrine. And in this book, he gave some very interesting statements about how paganism came in from sun worship into the Catholic Church. Here's the statement he makes in this book. He said, Constantine, in order to recommend the new religion to the heathen, transferred into it the outward ornaments to which they had been accustomed in their own. Now, here's a cardinal of the church saying that when Constantine came into the Catholic Church, he brought a lot of pagan things with him. He says, it is not necessary to go into a subject which the diligence of Protestant writers has made familiar to most of us. The use of temples, and these dedicated to particular saints, incense, candles, holy water, asylums, processions, the ring in marriage, turning to the east, images at a later date, are all of pagan origin and sanctified by their adoption into the church. Now, friends, that ring originally represented the disk of the sun. It was worn by the pagan sun worshipers to honor their sun god and to be with them constantly to remind them of the disk of the sun. And when Constantine brought all these pagan objects into the church, he brought that ring with him, and the nuns of the church began to wear it to represent being married to Christ or married to the church. And from there it passed into Protestantism as a sign of marriage. But it's not in the Bible at all. I know people who think that if they don't have that little piece of metal on their finger, they're not married. And they pull it off at times and say they're not married. Well, now, friends, you're married because you make vows to God and to each other. That's what marriage is. And that little ring doesn't mean a thing. I don't have to prove that I'm faithful to my wife to the public. I don't have to prove to anybody. I keep my promises. I'm faithful because of the promises I made. But I just mentioned this to give you a little background and to show you that we don't have to quibble over the kind, whether it's a class ring, a Masonic ring, or any other ring. I say let's give God the benefit of the doubt. Why run a risk of displeasing Him? And if He doesn't like rings, let's say, well, that's it. We won't bother with any of them. Come on down to the next book of the Bible, which is Jeremiah, chapter 4, verse 30. And when thou art spoiled, what wilt thou do? Though thou clothest thyself with crimson, though thou deckest thee with ornaments of gold, though thou rentest thy face with painting, in vain shalt thou make thyself fair. Thy lovers will despise thee, they will seek thy life. Now, all through the Bible, God uses a woman to represent the church. Remember that? A woman to represent the church. He's married to the church. She's the bride. He's the bridegroom. And He uses this woman to symbolize the relationship with His faithful people. But friends, when His people became unfaithful and turned away from Him, how do you think the woman is represented, the bride of Christ? She's represented as going after her lovers and becoming unfaithful to Him, see? And in every case that I can read here in the prophets, my friends, when she turns away symbolically from her husband to go after her lovers, she puts on all of the adornments. In other words, it's used in the Bible as a symbol of apostasy and a symbol of unfaithfulness. Here he's talking about his bride, and he says, thy lovers will despise thee, though you clothe yourself with ornaments of gold and rent your face with painting. He says, they will despise thee, they'll seek thy life. Going on into the next book of the prophets, in Ezekiel chapter 23, he uses two women here to represent Judah and Israel in verse 36. He gives them names even. He said, the Lord said moreover unto me, Son of man, wilt thou judge Aholah and Aholibah? Yea, declare unto them their abominations, that they've committed adultery. And verse 40, and furthermore that ye have sent for men to come from far, unto whom a messenger was sent. And lo, they came, for whom thou didst wash thyself, paintest thy eyes, and deckest thyself with ornaments. He said, you've turned away from me. You've gone after your lovers. And you've put on all these things and have become unfaithful to me. You find that same thought repeated again in the little book of Hosea, chapter 2 and verse 13. And I will visit upon her the days of Balaam, wherein she burned incense to them, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers and forgot me, saith the Lord. Same thing again, turning away from Him, going off to commit spiritual adultery, and putting on all these things which are used in the Bible as a symbol of unfaithfulness. Coming over into the New Testament, we find similar statements. In 1 Peter 3, 1-3, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. And this word conversation, of course, is a word meaning the deportment, the conduct, not just the speech, but rather the whole way of life. While they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and of wearing of gold. Now this word plaiting, by the way, is a Greek word meaning to weave ornaments into the hair. See, the word here is plaiting, and there's another use of it we'll read now in Timothy in just a moment. But it says, let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Then we come back to Timothy here. First Timothy 2, verse 9. It says, in like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls. And this word broided, that's the word I was thinking of. Plaited in Peter, and here it's broided, but it's the same original word, meaning the weaving of ornaments into. So it says, not with this, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. So these are just a few texts now. And friends, to me, these give, and this is not all of them by any means. You'll find most of them, though, in the little book you'll receive. But I've just read enough to show you the hints that are given in the Bible. And I think they're a little more than hints, really. I think they're more than little hints and indications. Now, somebody may say, well, Brother Joe, you know, that's a little thing. You're talking about a small, little, inconsequential thing. Of course it is. Well, let me ask you something, Rich. How do you show your love the most? By the big things or the little things you do? Well, you ask any lady, you know. I'm sure my wife would appreciate a new washing machine or a new dryer for her birthday. But if I came in one day with a little bunch of hand-picked flowers that I'd gone out in the field and gathered for her, and come in and say, honey, I'm going to dry the dishes for you today, she would appreciate that a lot more than the washer or dryer. She really would. It would show my love for her a lot more, because she would know that I'd never go out and pick those flowers for any other reason except that I wanted to please her, show my love to her. It's in those little things, folks, that we do that really show our love. You may think this is a small matter. Maybe it is. But I believe it's in those small things that we really show our true love to God and our willingness to put Him above ourselves.
You've just been listening to Joe Cruz on the remarkable question of what the Bible has to say on the use of cosmetics in jewelry. I'd like you to have Joe's little book on this topic, and in a minute I'll tell you how to get it, but first, here are the Amazing Facts singers with the song, This Could Be the Year When Jesus Comes.